So for tonight, we're going to cover Revelation chapter 7 through 11. All right? Those are the chapters we're going to cover. We're not going to read through all of it, but we are going to cover it. And so if you're looking at our timeline, right, the 7 seals are the first 7 events of Revelation. Then we have the 7 trumpets, right? And then next week we're going to talk about the 7 bowls of wrath. It is title set. But tonight we're just talking about the 7 trumpets. So this is the 3.5-year mark right in the middle. And I'm excited to get to that point because that's when it's starting to start getting really interesting. All right. So first of all, we left off last week talking about the 144,000 people. Okay? So this isn't going to be on your notes, but I do want to cover this really briefly. So the book of Revelation talks about how God is going to seal, or He's going to choose and call 144,000 people to act as His witnesses and His evangelists during the events of the book of Revelation. So some Christians disagree about who these people are. Some say that it's 12,000 people from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So they believe that Jewish people, even though today they largely don't believe in Christ, that God is going to call them, right? And they're going to evangelize the whole earth. So God's going to, reignite the Jewish people for the cause of Christ. And that they're going to evangelize the whole world. Other people believe that this could be 144,000 people of anybody, right? Because we know that as Christians, that we are considered, in a spiritual sense, part of Israel, right? We're not ethnically Jewish or anything like that, but in a spiritual sense, we belong to the family of God, and so we could easily be included in what this event is talking about. So the 144,000 people are either literally Jewish or they're spiritually Jewish, meaning they're Christians, right? People that God calls to evangelize during the events of the tribulation. And here's what I want to know, and we'll move on, is that a lot of times when we talk about the book of Revelation, we talk about how there's a lot of wrath of God, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of hard times. It's not a fun time. It's a very difficult time to be a Christian. But one of the things that we can't forget about is what the Bible makes clear is that while it's a time of great persecution, it's also a time of great revival. More people are going to be saved during the time of the tribulation than at any other point in history. That the gospel is going to be preached to such an extent that every single person alive will have heard the gospel within 7 years of time. That's crazy. So the word of God it's not like God's work is just going to stop and the whole world is it's so evil and so terrible that even Christians would want to die. Like, yes, there's going to be a hard time for Christians. The church is going to be persecuted like it's never has been before. But in the middle of that, the church is going to grow at a rate that it's never grown before. One of the things the Bible says is that God uses the weak and foolish things of the world to advance His kingdom, right? That God can take the worst of situations and manage to use it for His glory. And so that's what's going to happen with these people that God calls to evangelize during the end times. Okay. So we didn't get a chance to talk about that last week, but there's the brief explanation in case you're wondering if that number comes up and some Mormon or Jehovah's Witness tells you that only 144,000 people go to heaven. You're like, bro, that's not even what it's talking about. They actually teach that, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, okay, the first trumpet. So now if you're taking notes, this is when you can start filling this in. So the first trumpet, right, it's breaking out of that 7th seal like I talked about, right, is hail and fire. So if you're saying, as far as filling it in what it is, it's hail and fire. And you can find it in Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. Okay? So those little blanks, you might want to fill those in. So it's hail and fire. You can find it in Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. Okay, so I'm going to read that. So if you're reading along with me, go to Revelation chapter 8. Okay? And it says, "When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And then I saw 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with the golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne." It says, "And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake." So this incense, okay, so if you don't know, in the Roman Catholic Church, they use incense. They use it to bless, the sanctuary, right? And it's a sweet-smelling aroma. So in a symbolic sense, what John is seeing in this while he's in heaven's throne room is that there's an angel that has a golden censer, and that the incense in it is the prayers of Christians. Now this angel is casting this incense and this aroma at the throne of God and bringing these prayers to the throne of God. And so God is hearing the prayers of His church that's going through persecution, right? And now it's about to get real. God's about to respond to the 7 seals, these 7 events that took place. Now God's about to respond with His own events, right? His own judgments on the earth. So now we have 7 trumpets. So in verse 6 it says, "Now the 7 angels who have the 7 trumpets prepare to blow them. And the first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood. And these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all of the green grass was burned up." So this first trumpet, this first judgment of God on the earth is hail and fire. So there's 2 events that occur. So if you're writing notes, you want to write these down. The first is global destruction, right? There's some sort of supernatural judgment where God pours out hail and fire on the earth, right? That sounds crazy to me, right? So that's the first thing. And then as a result of that, the second event is 1/3 of the earth, the trees, and the grass are burned up. Can you imagine going to like any park, going out into your backyard, and 1/3 of it has been destroyed due to a judgment of God? I don't know about you, that would freak me out. All right, I would not be liking that. All right, I'd be pretty jumpy.
Imagine if you.
Just imagine. Okay, so now what we have to note here. So as far as the symbols, okay, what is the hail and fire? Is this a literal hail and fire, right? Is this like, literally giant balls of hail and like fire coming from the sky? It could be. But if you remember from last week, we talked about the 6th seal was a global earthquake, and I said it's possible that that's not a literal earthquake. That could be symbolic for a great political shift. And so this hail and fire is the result or the end product of that global earthquake. So the first symbol is this. So if you're putting for the symbols, put hail and fire, and then it's the fallout from the 6th seal. So if that 6th seal is literal, and it's an actual earthquake that occurred, then that would mean the hail and fire is also literal, right? But if that 6th seal is, symbolic, then it's possible that the hail and fire may just be like God is judging the earth for what happened before. So we'll assume it's literal, okay? And the blood, right? If you're looking at symbols, so the blood is either literal, meaning that people have died from this judgment, and so now there's blood. That's because it says there's hail and fire mixed with blood, meaning people have died from it. Or it could be a mix of ash and gas from a volcanic eruption. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, so like when volcanoes are up, all this ash and gas gets mixed with water, and it has this like blood-like color to it. And it's not literal blood, it has the appearance of blood. So the blood mentioned here could either be literal, talking about people dying, or it could be a mix of ash and gas from some sort of eruption. Does anybody have any questions? Everybody following? Everybody tracking? Yes. Am I making any sense? Okay. So here's the second trumpet. Is a great mountain is destroyed. And this is in Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 through 9. Okay. A great mountain is destroyed. Okay, let me read it, and then we'll talk about the events and symbols. It says, "And the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed." Now what's interesting is it says something like a great mountain was thrown into the sea. So it's saying that it's not a literal mountain that is thrown into the sea, because that would, imagine like seeing Mount Everest, like God lifting it up and just throwing it across the earth into the sea. All right? That would be kind of, if we take that literally, that's kind of like bizarre to think about. But it says something like a great mountain destroyed. So for that first event is this destruction of a major mountain. I put that in quotes, so you might want to put that in quotes in your notes, because I don't think that's a literal mountain. Okay? And then for the second event that occurs, 1/3 of the sea life and all ships in the ocean are destroyed. Okay, so let me tell you what I think this mountain is. When we talk about the symbols. So first, the mountain for the symbols, it's probably some sort of great or powerful country. I don't think this is a literal mountain because it even says in the verse something like a great mountain. And oftentimes in the Bible, mountains are used to symbolize kingdoms. And so what I think is happening, this second trumpet, this second judgment of God, is that some great country, some powerful country, God is going to destroy. Right? Whether it's through some physical judgment, whether it's through God sending other armies in to invade it or crush it, something's going to happen. And this mountain, I believe, symbolizes a great country. And the second symbol, now it's talking about blood again. I think this time it's talking about literal blood. Because you think about this. How many times throughout the Old Testament, when God judges a country, He usually sends in another country to make war against it, right? So there's literal bloodshed as a result of a war that God basically allowed to happen as a form of judgment. And so you think about, guys, think about today. Have y'all ever seen an aircraft carrier, those giant naval ships that just hold dozens and dozens of aircraft? Those things are crazy. And we have warships that can just launch missiles and rockets from miles away. Guys, we have some crazy capabilities of fighting on the sea. So I want to imagine what would happen if every country in the world was engaged in some sort of a global conflict in the sea. Would it not be very likely that probably a lot of ocean life would die in that process if everybody was to really go at it with the technology we have today? Probably a third of all the ships that we have would probably be destroyed at least. And I would say it wouldn't be so far of a stretch to say that probably a large chunk of sea life would be destroyed if we have a giant naval warfare, right? And so I think the blood symbol is probably literal in this judgment. It sounds like this is some sort of country that God is destroying and is being judged. Okay. Make sure I'm following my notes here. Oh, by the way, just as a little side fact, a little fun fact, all right? If you guys were to guess, how many warships do you think exist in the world today? Total, between all the different countries. If you're to guess, somebody give me a number. How many warships do you think exist?
1,000.
1,000? Okay, anybody else? What would y'all say?
25,000.
25,000? Anybody else?
600,000.
600,000?
Probably.
Dang, that's a lot of ships. 150? What do you think, DeShaylin?
I didn't say
You're smarter than everybody in this room. You tell me.
Who said that?
I did. What do you think? What is DeShaylin's guess?
I don't know.
Just make a guess. You don't have to know.
I have no clue.
3.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The actual number is actually 3,000 and about 3,300. So 3,300 ships. You know, some of you may think, oh, that's a lot. Some of you may think, wow, that sounds like it's not enough. Right? So 3,000 ships, if we take out a third of those, it's about 1,000 ships. Is that completely feasible in a global war that about 1,000 of those be destroyed?
Yeah.
I think so. That's all I'm saying. I think so. I think it makes sense to me. Okay, y'all ready? The third trumpet. The third trumpet. So the third trumpet is a great star falls from heaven. And it can be found in Revelation 8, chapters 10 through 11. So the third trumpet is a great star falls from heaven. Okay, so I'm going to read, and then we're going to talk about it. It says, and the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. And the name of the star is wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. Okay, so like a lot of things in Revelation, again, there's two ways to look at this. It's either talking about a literal star falling, so it could be like a meteor, right? Or it's talking about some sort of symbolic event. But the two major events I want to highlight first is the first one is this. It's the fall of something major. The fall of something major is the first event. And the second event is many people are harmed by poisoning of water. Quotations, water. Okay? So so let's talk about those symbols for a second. So first of all, the star falling from heaven. Now, how many of you guys have heard the term, well, first of all, when we refer to popular people, we usually call them what? Stars, right?
Celebrities.
Hollywood stars, celebrities, the stars. We always call them, why do we call them the stars? It sounds a little bit like we're worshiping them. They're like the stars of heaven. I will bow to them. It just sounds really dumb anyway. I don't like, oh yeah, you're a star, okay. Anyway, so first of all, the star being talked about here is either a literal star, meaning it's a meteor, or it's a big influential person, right? How many times do big influential people do something dumb and now they fall from their popularity, right? That's pretty common, okay? So, but in this case, we don't know for sure if it's a literal meteor that's falling, or if this is some sort of influential person that falls, quote unquote, and causes damage. Now, the damage that the book talks about, it says that that the star falls on the rivers, and the rivers become poisoned, right? So this poisoned water is the second symbol, and so it's either the waters become literally poisoned because this meteor, whatever it is, releases some sort of toxic chemicals, right? God is judging the earth by throwing down a literal meteor and poisoning the water supply, or if it's an influential person, this poisoned water is a form of spiritual poisoning. Because, right, Jesus uses this language when he talks about himself. He says, "Come to me that you may never thirst," right? "Drink of the water that I give you and you'll never thirst." Now, Jesus, when he said that in the New Testament, he's not talking about, I have literal water that if you drink it, you'll never be thirsty ever again. Jesus is talking about himself as living water, right? He's referring to himself in a symbolic sense that he is the water of life, the living water, right? So if this, third trumpet is symbolic, right? It's talking about some big influential person, falls from grace. Maybe this could be somebody in the church, somebody proclaiming to be a Christian at the time, decides to walk away from their faith and begin to poison the church with lies, deceptions, false teaching, poisoning the water, so to speak. That could be what it's talking about. And some people take that view. And so lastly, the last symbol there is wormwood. So you're like, what is wormwood? Why is it called wormwood? Is it like a piece of wood with worms in it? What does that even mean? So wormwood is actually the name of a poisonous and bitter plant. It's an actual plant that exists, and it's called wormwood. And it's known to be, one, extremely bitter, and two, it actually has a chemical in it that's actually poisonous. And if you're really curious, there's actually an alcoholic drink that is made using the wormwood plant called absinthe. And it used to be very popular, but a lot of people started going crazy, apparently, from drinking it. A lot of artists, the artist Van Gogh, have you ever heard of him? Okay, so apparently he cut off his ear at one point in his life, and according to reports, it was after he started drinking this absinthe drink, and he went like crazy and cut his ear off. So I don't know, about you guys, but wormwood sounds pretty gross. Also, I'm so sorry that it's hot. Welcome to the 180 youth, where the temperature is piping hot, both literally and spiritually. So the wormwood. So whether this is it's a meteor of some kind or it's an influential person, it's going to be poisonous and it's going to infect the water. People are either going to be literally being killed or they're going to be spiritually poisoned by this person's false teaching. Okay, I'll let you guys kind of think through that yourself and what view you want to take, all right? So the fourth trumpet is the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. The sun, moon, and stars are darkened. And this can be found in Revelation chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. And it says, "And the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night." Okay. So the one event that occurs is the lights, quote unquote, are darkened for 1/3 of their normal time. Now again, if we're taking this literally, right? Think about when a volcano erupts, all the ashes in the air, right? That tends to block out the sun. Okay, I don't know if you guys have ever seen pictures from places where this volcano erupted, but it tends to be very dark pictures. That's because sunlight and moonlight can't get through, right? The atmosphere has been clouded out. So in that event, so if we're taking it literally, it could be that these lights, if we're looking at the symbols, that the lights could be literally talking about the sun, moon, and stars being darkened from the previous judgments, right? The fallout, the gases, the ash, whatever it is, is causing there to be a darkness for 1/3 of the normal time of the day, 1/3 of the normal time of the night, because of the amount of stuff going on in the atmosphere. It's also possible that these lights are major governments. Again, this could be referring to some sort of governments that are having some sort of power over the earth, and so God is in some way, interfering with them. So for that first symbol, the lights are either literal lights, right, talking about the sun, moon, and stars, or they could be symbolic for some, major governments. And the darkening, which is the sex symbol, the next symbol. All right, the next symbol, the darkening. Wow, don't tell me I should have said that. I'm going to edit that out later. So it's either a literal darkness, like we just talked about, or it's divine interference with government. So God is blocking out the ability of these governments to do what they're trying to do during this time. Okay, so it's either literal darkness or divine interference with governments. Okay. And here's the deal. As I'm talking about how these things could be literal or symbolic, here's what I want you guys to keep in mind. It very well could be both. There could be a physical judgment that God is doing on the earth, and there could also be something else symbolically that God is accomplishing as well. So I don't want you guys to think that it's either or, like either this has to be literal or it has to be symbolic. It could very well be that God is doing both of those things. There is a physical judgment, and there is something else going on that is being symbolized by this judgment. Okay? Whoa, I'm sorry. Hey, Shayla takes good notes, all right? She's a smart person in this room. She knows how to take. I'm sorry. You answered one question right, and I'm very impressed because I usually get wrong answers from everybody else. I'm just kidding. All right. Everybody got it down?
Yes.
I've noticed it's really interesting. When I give you guys notes to take and it follows my lesson, y'all love taking notes. I cannot, if I beat you over the head with a notebook and told you to write notes when I'm doing a sermon, you wouldn't do it. But if I give you an outline, you guys love doing it. I've noticed that. It does make it easier, right?
If you beat me over the head, I would do it back to you.
Clayton said, yeah, you beat me over the head, I'm going to beat you right back over the head with my own notebook. Okay, so the fifth trumpet. This is where, hey, this one's going to be a little more interesting, so I hope you guys are paying attention. Say how much time do I have?
I am.
7:40. So you have 20 minutes.
Nice! We got plenty of time. Okay, so these next two trumpets, guys, we're going to spend a little bit of time on these next two. The fifth trumpet is the Antichrist raises an army. You need a pen?
A pencil.
I don't have a pencil, I'm sorry. Did you like? Oh, wait. Oh, you're lucky. I do have a pencil. You just not like pens?
Oh my goodness.
The fifth trumpet is the Antichrist raises an army. That can be found in Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 through 12. So let me read it first, and then we'll go through each event one by one and each symbol one by one. Okay, it's a little bit more. Okay, so here it goes. It says, and the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth. And he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. And he opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft arose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened from the smoke of the shaft. And the shaft is just an opening, it's a pit. Okay? It says, then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions on the earth. And they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And that's talking about the 144,000 that God called to evangelize. So they're prevented from harming those people. Supernatural, right? God's protecting them. It says they were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. It says, and in those days people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. Okay, now here's what I want you guys to pay attention. Here's where it starts getting weird. I'm going to describe the appearance of these locusts, all right? It says, in appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold, and their faces were like human faces. Their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. And they have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. This is that falling star. It says, and his name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon, and that just means destroyer. Okay, so that sounds really bizarre, all right? So at this point, I think you guys can understand, if we only take the book of Revelation literally, we're going to end up with this wacky description of these weird demon army that has scorpion tails and the face of a man, but the body of a horse, and it sounds crazy, right? At this point, you're like, I think maybe there's some symbolism going on, right? Maybe he doesn't quite mean literally what he says. But let's talk about these 3 events. So the first event that occurs is the bottomless pit is opened. I put that in quotations. The bottomless pit is opened. And so this bottomless pit, I'm going to go over the symbol. So I'm going to go do one event and one symbol at a time to help you guys, right? So the first event is the bottomless pit is opened. If you write on your symbol section, so the bottomless pit means hell. It's a reference to hell. Now, what we don't know is if this pit being opened is a reference like if this means hell is literally opened up, or there's or in a spiritual sense, the Antichrist is pulling an idea, pulling inspiration out of the depths of hell for what he's about to do next. So the bottomless pit, we do know it does mean hell. But what we don't know if this opening of it is a literal opening of hell, and the Antichrist brings something out of it, or if this is a spiritual opening where the Antichrist is taking inspiration from the depths of hell. Have you ever heard parents talk about their kids like, man, that child acts like a devil? Okay, are you literally saying your child is the devil? No, he acts like a devil, right? So there's a difference in meaning, and so it could be, as we go through the rest of it, I'm going to explain to you what I think, okay? The second event is an army of locusts emerges. Okay, again, put that in brackets, because I don't think that's a literal locust that are coming out of the pit of hell. Okay, so let's talk about the symbol of the locust. So of course, if you're taking it literally, you would have to assume that these locusts are some sort of demonic creatures that have physical form. Right? They got the face of a man, the body of a horse, hair like a woman. They got a crown on their heads. they got a scorpion stinger as their tail. Okay, this is bizarre symbols. So if you're taking this literally, then it would have to be these are some sort of demonic creatures that are coming from hell, and they're brought onto the earth to torment everybody who's not saved. They're not allowed to destroy any plants. They're only allowed to harm people, but they can't even kill the people. They can only sting them like a scorpion. Okay? So that's one way you can interpret it. I think that's a little wacky. The other way you can interpret it is the locusts are modern military technology like helicopters. Now we're going to get into that here in just a second. So the locusts are either literal demonic forces or it's modern military tech like helicopters. And I'm going to show you guys this comparison and why I think one makes more sense than the other. The last event is the world is terrorized by this army for 5 months. The world is terrorized by the army for 5 months. And so this torment, again, these are literal physical creatures. So this torment would be physical torment. Or it's possible that this torment is spiritual. Okay, now, I want to show you guys a painting of what artists have tried to... They're trying to depict what this description is. If they're taking it literally... I want to show you guys a painting of what these locusts would look like, all right? Look at this. Look at this. Look at this stuff. Okay, so it looks ridiculous, all right? I'm not going to lie. This one looks way worse, all right? This is just like, if I saw this flying at me, yeah, I would be terrified. But I don't know if I'd be terrified out of fear or terrified out of, man, this is so bizarre. I got to wake up out of this dream. All right, what kind of drugs did somebody put in my food? But as you can see, I mean, if we're taking it literally, this is what they got to look like. You got the body of a horse, the face of a man, teeth of a lion, long flowing hair like a woman, because I guess it's saying that women are evil or something like that. They got the crowns on their heads. They got the scorpion sting. Look at the little tiny scorpion tail these things have. I mean, it's just like, it's just weird. You know that one's got a scorpion tail too? So if we take this trumpet literally, this is what we're talking about. Okay? I'm sorry, I just can't see it. All right? I just can't see that this is literally going to come out of a hole in the ground and that's what's going to come out, and this is going to go around stinging people. Imagine this coming at you and it's just like whipping its butt at you trying to sting you or something. Like, come on. Like, that can't be what's being talked about. Something else has to be being described. So, now remember, when John is seeing this vision, John is from the 1st century, meaning within from the year 0 to the year 100. That's when John is alive. They don't have modern military or modern stuff that we do now. He's seeing a vision of the future. And so he's trying his best to describe what he's seeing in terms that he is familiar with. So now I want to show you guys a picture of a helicopter. And I want to tell you guys why I think this is a better fit for the description. So I'm going to read for you this appearance again, and I want you guys to look at this helicopter while I'm doing it. Okay. In appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. What do you think this thing is made to do? It says, on their heads are what look like crowns of gold. Look at the top of this helicopter, right at the very top. It's like a crown. By the way, you're like, but Tyler, that's not gold. These helicopters can come in a configuration where they have a tan color and it looks golden in the sunlight. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. And it says, and their faces were like human faces. Who sits in the pilot seat that you can see their face clearly? That's right, human beings. Okay, and they're like human faces, and it says their hair like women's hair. I don't know, long blades? Blades of hair? Y'all see what I'm saying? Long blades? Okay, okay. And it says, and their teeth are like lions' teeth. What do lions use their teeth for? Attack. What do you think you want?
I'm not even
got all these weapons. That kind of looks sharp to me. If you're looking from far away, you're like, I don't know what that is, but teeth like lions' teeth. Okay? And it says, and they have breastplates like breastplates of iron. This entire thing is made of reinforced steel. The best description of that is iron, right? Just looks like iron, some kind of metal. It says, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses running into battle. I don't know if you guys have ever been close to a helicopter, but that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like a bunch of horses running into battle. Right? It's just a massive, loud noise. In fact, if you don't know this, if you aren't wearing special headsets, you actually cannot hear anything other than brrrr the entire time. That's why pilots have to wear the headsets. That's how loud it is. It says they have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. Now, if you've ever seen a helicopter from the side, you know, it kind of has that tail that comes out, has the lift, right? But you're like, okay, but the tail isn't used for a weapon, right? However, you can mount weapons on any part of the helicopter that you wish, right? And it says, they have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. Now, okay, now at this point, this is the one part where you might go, hold on. But didn't it say that the locusts only have the power to hurt people and not kill them? So if he's describing a helicopter, well, this is meant to kill people, right? This is meant for battle. So, maybe it's not that. But here where it gets a little bit more interesting. So you guys know, just as well as I do, that we have non-lethal weapons that exist in the world, right? We have tasers, other forms, and stuff like that. Well, there is a newer kind of weapon that the military has been testing that's non-lethal. I want to show you guys a video of this system, all right? And then we're going to talk about how it fits even better than we thought it was before. Okay, let me show you guys the video. It's about 2 minutes long, so just watch it. It's called the active denial system.
Marines and several other DoD representatives had quite the heated demonstration at Quantico, Virginia from the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate.
This is a military area. Move away from the perimeter. I say again, this is a military area. Move away from the perimeter.
Their new active denial system boasts a reach far beyond any other non-lethal system.
Well, it's a versatile system. It has a range of non-lethal capability that we can't even come close to with any of our fielded systems today that are in our military forces.
About 7 football fields to give it some perspective. It can deter individuals on a military perimeter all the way up to a riotous crowd, all without permanent harm.
It only penetrates 1/64 of an inch of your skin, goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are, and there's no permanent injury caused by it. Very safe. We build in some safety margins and training for the operators.
They even let any of the guests volunteer to test out its effectiveness and safety, including the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
It is something that, once again, probably the safest system that we've developed as far as the non-lethal capability.
From Washington, I'm Sergeant Andrew Milner.
Okay, so this system this is from 2012, by the way, so this is actually a really old video. So this weapon system basically shoots out invisible microwaves that makes direct contact with you, and it burns, like, instantly. Okay? Now, obviously, in this demonstration, they're not trying to actually really, really hurt people, right? They're just trying to show how it works. So I want you guys to think about for a second, again, in the context of what we're talking about. Hey, I need y'all to pay attention over there, please. In the context of what we're talking about, the Antichrist, in some way, shape, or form, pulls out and creates an army of locusts. And he uses this army to harm people without killing them. So remember, the Bible describes the Antichrist as a cruel dictator. This is not some dude who's just like, hey, let's all like world peace, bro. He's a dude who comes to power and tries to use force to make the world under his control. So you imagine if there's all these wars and conflicts going on as a way to control people, the Antichrist has this brilliant idea, hey, let's send out this army and this units of helicopters with these microwave weapons to just burn people and torment them to keep them in check. Is that really so far to believe that this could happen? Again, I think this perfectly fits what John, if you've never seen a helicopter before and you live in like first century, that's probably exactly how I describe the helicopter, is how he just did it there. Right? So they're using some kind of weapon that is able to harm people without killing them. And the weapon hurts so badly that people would rather die than be harmed by it. And in fact, has anybody ever been stung by a scorpion? I haven't. I've been stung by a bee, not a scorpion. So people who describe scorpions, you'd say it feels like you're like a really intense burn. Okay?
It's like a venom. Like if you get bit by a snake, it's the same feeling.
Really intense burn. That system is designed to feel like a burn. So all I'm saying is, the Bible's ahead of its time in describing this kind of stuff. So again, I think this trumpet is some sort of an army of some kind that uses modern military technology to harm people and keep them in control. I think the Antichrist uses this. Honestly, it doesn't have to be a demonic army that the Antichrist uses to hurt people. He can use modern technology, right? Because his mindset is from the pit of hell. He has this idea, hey, I'm going to use this to torment people. That sounds like something that sounds like straight out of the pit of hell, if you ask me, to do that to harm people and control them. Okay. Next one. Okay, so the sixth trumpet. Yeah, you have a question?
5 minutes.
Okay. The sixth trumpet, this is the last trumpet we're going to talk about tonight, all right? Is this. It's fallen angels lead a second army. So there's another army. So the sixth trumpet is fallen angels lead a second army. And you can find this trumpet in Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 21. Okay, so I'm going to read this. It says, "And the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. And the number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. That's 200 million people. And it says, "And I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision and those who rode them. They wore breastplates the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur." So that would be red, blue, and tan. All right. It says, "And the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and the fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. And by these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed by fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. And their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. And it says, "And the rest of mankind," let me make sure I'm reading this correctly. Yes, "and the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, nor give up worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze, and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murderers, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts." Okay, so again, we come to this really bizarre description, which says that these angels, there's 4 angels that are released, and that they raise up this second army, right? So these events, so the first event that occurs is this. There's 4 fallen angels are released. These are not angels from God, because angels from God do not go on genocide campaigns, all right? They don't go, "Oh, let's kill a third of the human race just for the fun of it," right? Angels, so these are fallen angels. First of all, we have to understand it. These are fallen angels that initiate this second army. Okay. The second event that occurs is an army of 200 million men go to war. If you need a reference, the current size of the human race is about 7.5 billion people. So 1 billion is with the only way to describe that outside of using the term a billion is to say 1,000 million. So you have 999 million, and then after that you have a billion. Okay, so 200 million people, that is, if you do math, that is 20% of a billion. Wow. Okay, that's a huge number, unironically, 200 million people. And so the third event is that as a result of this war, 1/3 of the human race is killed. 1/3 of the human race is killed as a result of this army, whatever it is. Okay, so let's talk about these symbols. Again, got a really bizarre description, but let's go through it one by one. So first, now, John is not describing an army of locusts, now he's describing an army of horses, specifically. Okay? So if you're writing down stuff for the symbols, the horses most likely are modern tanks. Okay, most likely they're modern tanks. The fire, smoke, and sulfur that it talks about coming out of their mouths is probably tank artillery and weapons, right? If you've ever seen a tank fire, you know that is its primary weapon, right? And that artillery shell is going to blow out fire and smoke and all kinds of stuff, right? That's the mouth of the tank, so to speak. And it's in the serpent tails, which is the last symbol. This would be like weapons that are placed on the back end of a tank. So you guys don't know, tanks usually don't just have the big cannon and that's it. They usually have smaller guns that are mounted on the rear so that soldiers can protect the back of the tank when the front of the tank is, pointing that way. So there's always somebody on the back who can act as like a watch for the tank. Okay, so again, I want to show you guys a painting. If we take what John's description literally, then we're going to get something that looks a little bizarre. Okay, so this is what that would look like. You have horses, got the head of a lion, they're shooting out, fire beams from their mouth, and they got, these crazy riders on them. Okay, again, this may fit a Harry Potter book, but I don't think this is a fair description of what the Bible is actually trying to say. I don't think John is actually seeing this. I think he's seeing something else, again, that he's having trouble describing in his terms. Does anybody think that this is actually going to happen on the earth? I don't think so. Okay. But it is kind of funny to look at. It's like, okay, that would be fun to paint, though. Okay. Here's what is a better description. Tanks. Tunkies. All right? Now, I'm going to read that description again, just in case you need a refresher, and just why, so you can see how well it fit. It says, "Now this is how I saw the horses in my vision and those who rode them. They wore breastplates the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur." So like I said before, that's going to be like a reddish color, it's going to be a bluish color, it's going to be a yellowish color. Now, if you don't know about tanks, they can be camouflaged. Reddish color, a bluish color, and a tannish color. Wow. That's called camouflage. Right? These are the kind of colors. Now, of course, these tanks also have green, so let's not discount the green.
They spray paint.
But you can paint a tank any color you want. And in desert environments, obviously, you're going to have a lot more browns and tans and stuff like that. Okay, you're not going to have a lot of green. But the point remains. So the colors can match with any tank, modern tank that's being painted. So And it says, and the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. Like I just said, this is what a tank is designed to do. Out of the mouth of a tank, right? Fire, smoke, and sulfur are modern weapons, right? And it says, and by these plagues a third of mankind was killed. And it says, and for the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. Again, guys, see this guy right here?
Yeah.
Go back. You know what that's in his hand? It's a gun. It's on the back end of the tank. Again, designed to protect the tank from the rear. So again, this description, if you're John, and you don't live in the modern world, and you're trying to describe that to your buddies, how he described it would be about the best effort he could give, right? Some kind of, man, it's like a horse, but it's not a horse, and it's got this boom thing that comes out of the front of it, and man, it's like, and they got like this dude on the back, and he's like hurting people, but I don't know how to explain it. I'm struggling. Okay? But y'all see how this fits, right? And nobody's lost here on me? Okay. Last thing, and we are going to be done for tonight. So the Bible goes on to describe, after it talks about this sixth trumpet, it goes on to describe who the Bible calls the two witnesses. Okay? So, I want to read a brief verse for you guys, so you guys can know at least what we're talking about. So, the two witnesses can be found in Revelation chapter 11, verses 3 through 12. Hey, can I have y'all quiet in the court, please? I need y'all to listen. Can't have any interruptions. Thank you. Revelation chapter 11, verses 3 through 12. I want to read you guys verses 4 and 5, because I want to summarize. It says, actually, I'm going to read verse 3. It says, and I will grant authority to my two witnesses, this is God talking, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, that's 3.5 years, clothed in sackcloth. It says, and these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone would harm them, fire pours out of their mouth and consumes their foes. And if anyone would harm them, this is how he is doomed to be killed. So the Bible says that whoever these two people are, it never gives us their names. So some people have thought the two witnesses could be Elijah and, oh my gosh, let me make sure I get it right. Elijah and Enoch. I don't know if that's a blank in your notes or not.
Yes.
So Elijah and Enoch is the first guess as to who these two witnesses are. It could either be Elijah and Enoch, or it could be two other people who don't exist yet. It could just be two Christians that God calls to be witnesses. And these witnesses, whoever they are going to act as prophets on behalf of God during the final 3.5 years, the 1,260 days of the events of Revelation. Okay? And during this time, it says that they're going to prophesy, and it says that if anybody tries to harm them, they're going to breathe fire out of their mouth. Again, some people have said, that's literal, man. They're going to speak, and the fire's going to come out, and they're going to burn up their enemies. Okay, it could be. I think that sounds a little crazy, but it could be, right? God is a God of miracles. But I don't believe that to be the case. And by the way, the reason people believe it could be Enoch and Elijah, if anybody knows, those are the only two people in all of the Bible that never actually died. They were supernaturally taken up out of the earth before their deaths. And so the reason some people believe these two witnesses could be Enoch and Elijah is because they're the only people that actually never technically died a physical death. So God brings them back, right, at the end of the world. Hey, I'm going to give you a final chance to preach and, my word. So that's that. So this fire could be literal, but it's probably not. Okay, I'm going to read you another verse, and here's why I don't think they breathe literal fire. So we go to Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 14. It says, therefore, thus says the Lord, the God of hosts, because you have spoken this word, behold, I am making my words in your mouth a fire, and this people wood, and the fire shall consume them. Now in this case, God is talking to a prophet in the Old Testament, and he's telling them that, listen, because the people of Israel have been disobedient to me, I'm going to make my words in your mouth a fire, symbolically, and they're going to be wood. And when you speak against them, it's going to be like fire consuming wood. I mean, they're going to preach fiery, passionate messages against people for their sin. So again, when we look at the two witnesses, I think that's what they're going to be doing. So this should be your last blank in your notes. So this is what I think. The two witnesses will preach with fiery passion and will be hated for it. So I'm not going to read this in the book, but the final thing that happens to the two witnesses is eventually the Antichrist is able to somehow or another get them killed. And for 3.5 days, their bodies are left in the streets. In the world, the unsaved people celebrate their deaths because they hate them so much, right? Yeah, if you're preaching fiery, passionate sermons from God that condemn people for their sin, they're not going to like that. So the people are going to be celebrating, and then finally, after 3.5 days, God actually raises them from the dead and brings them to heaven. And it freaks everybody out. So this is one of the events of Revelation. That's not a trumpet, but it is an event. Okay. That is all we have for tonight. Because the seventh trumpet is the 7 bowls of God's wrath. So if you want to know what the 7 bowls are, and those 7 events are, you have to come back next week and continue the series. Okay.